Welcome, everyone. Here to talk about Kanban today. And so, Kanban, as referenced in kanbanguides.org, I've got the website open there, kanbanguides, plural.org, and there you can read the Kanban guide. You can download it. We're working on some translations as well. And you can also join the community. There's a pro-kanban.org website as well, and there's a Slack channel for that community. And there's also a Slack channel for the guide itself in terms of anybody wanting to make any changes to the guide or making recommendations. If they don't want to join the pro-kanban.org community, they can still join kanbanguides.org, and your opinion can still be counted that way as well. There's also a submit ideas button where you can submit ideas, and those ideas will be considered in due course for the next release. And thank you for any suggestions that you're thinking of making. So got a couple of viewers already. Daniel Dwaran, hi Daniel from Montreal, co-author of Tameflow, and Tame Your Workflow rather, and Andriy as well from Ukraine. Hi Andriy, welcome. Thank you for joining, one of the professional Kanban trainers at pro-kanban.org. Thank you very much for joining. So for anybody else who's watching, if you want to ask a question, just comment on whichever stream you're using, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you are, Facebook, whatever. Just comment there, and I'll see your comments coming from the screen, and I'll try to address them as best I can. I'm going to time box this to under an hour, so let's get going. I'm just going to give you an overview, first of all, of kanbanguides.org, the guide itself, and the visualization that I put together that I might change actually, but I'll bring you through it nonetheless. Okay. So one more comment coming in there. Hi, Anna from LinkedIn. How are you doing today? Thank you very much for joining from Montreal. Also, I believe a member of the Tameflow community. So thank you very much for joining. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look through the guide itself. I'll just leave that message up there so you can see that people can comment and so on. So I'm going to just flick over to the website itself. So what is Kanban? So simply put, Kanban is a strategy to optimize the flow of value through a process. It's possible to talk about Kanban without talking about flow. Sorry, impossible. The fundamental idea behind Kanban is one of the best ways to optimize value delivery is to optimize process flow. In other words, how work gets done can be seen as a big component of value as what work gets done. So in the guide itself, you can, to look at it, you can just click on read online here, and it brings you in. It's very, very short, and really what we try to do, we try to bring it down to its essential components. Just said that actually the first sentence, by reducing Kanban to its essential components, the hope is that this guide will be a unifying reference for the community, and by building upon Kanban fundamentals, the strategy presented here can accommodate the full spectrum of value delivery and organizational challenges. In other words, if you have a slightly more advanced form of Kanban that you need to implement in a particular pocket of an organization, like for example, Tameflow, or you just maybe Kanban system, a flow system rather, you can do that. This is just a minimal guide that tries to kind of pick the bare essentials that a lot of these flow strategies, Kanban strategies have in common with each other. So there's bits and bobs in terms of what is Kanban, a strategy for optimizing the flow of value through a process that uses a visual pull-based system. And it lists off the 3 practices. I make jokes that we don't have any values and we don't have any principles. And I hope you see the humor in that. But you can use them optionally. If you have values and principles, that's fine. It's just that the guide doesn't include them as the bare bones essentials, if you like, in terms of what we think Kanban is at kanbanguides.org. So you define and visualize your workflow, essentially your Kanban board. Then you actively manage the work that goes through that board. We'll talk later on about how we manage to do that. And then you need to improve your workflow. Just because you've defined your board to look a particular way doesn't mean you're stuck with it. And I hope that in these times with coronavirus and all that. I hope that some people, they're probably using electronic tools. I hope you've got the flexibility to change your workflow design to be what works for your team or team of teams or whatever the organization that you're in. That's another interesting point, by the way. The whole concept of team is optional. So we talk about Kanban system members. All right, so it doesn't have to be a team. So why would you use it? Well, to be more effective, doing the right thing, to be more efficient, doing whatever you do, doing it better, and trying to be more predictable. Not sure we can be entirely predictable. We're trying to be more predictable based on history, assuming that the history of our work includes all sorts of a whole variety of stuff in terms of levels of complexity and so on. Considering the basket of work that we had before, using the historical data, this is what might happen with the current work that's going through the system. We always add a pinch of salt to any forecast that we give. One of the agility chefs from Bucharest, in south of Spain, I believe, he says, when he shows a forecast, he says, 15% chance that we're wrong, but I'll give you a better forecast next week. In other words, it's a beautiful way of saying we don't know. That's the way I describe it. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to ask the right questions, and it's not really limited either to any particular context. We're just refer to some of the main ones that the co-authors had experience in, but we're not restricted to those. But at the same time, we wouldn't be so blasé as to say that you could use it for anything, but we're saying, this is kind of where we proved it, and it's likely to work in a variety of different contexts. It's interesting that a lot of the work that we've been doing has been in non-software. So this might be a useful guide for people who are looking for some form of agility. They're not actually in the tech space. You could equally use it for software, but it's kind of interesting, given that agility is going viral now outside tech. Business agility and organization agility. It's another option for you to look at. So a little bit about the theory based on systems thinking, lean principles, queuing theory, variability and quality control. And then you got the practices. So you define your workflow. Every workflow needs to have these minimum things, but we haven't come up with a name for the things yet. Characteristics, I guess, but I don't want to get stuck on a word either because it might not be the right word. But at a minimum, you need to define the work that goes through the system. What kind of units of work go through? Are they we call them work items or items? Are they like for example, user stories or use cases? Are they projects? Are they, what are they? You kind of talk about what they are. You don't have to talk about them that way, though. You could talk about, is it product development? Is it some communications work? Is it preparing a legal case? What is it, right? So work item types are optional, but you should be clear as a team what kind of work goes through your board. You should also say when is the work started, when it's finished, right? So I just want to jump to that for a second. So maybe if I show you something visual, it might help. When I show people something visual, sometimes it could cause more problems than it solves, but just bear with me a moment. So imagine we had a workflow here where there were 3 in progress states. You don't have to have a backlog in Kanban. Or options or input queue, you don't have to have that. But let's say there was one as part of this process. They had some kind of backlog at the start. Then they had 3 in progress states. And then they had some kind of done or completed column. It doesn't have to be called done, but some kind of final column. So what you need to do as a team is say, okay, for each of those columns, if you have columns in your board, then what are the exit criteria to get out? So how does that go from backlog into the first in progress column? What's the decision criteria that we use as Kanban system members? And then for the in progress columns in particular, it's almost like a definition of done for each column, or it could be even entry criteria as well, I've seen. So, when can a card come in here? But typically it'd be like, when can a card go from the first in progress column to the second in progress column? You might have another policy here, exit criteria. You might have a policy for, excuse me, which kind of work should we start next, which is almost the same as the exit criteria from the first column there. That's the backlog, but it's a bit of a twist on it. Also, you could have a policy on, if you've got all this work in progress, which items should we work on today? often known as a pull policy or a move policy. The policy for starting work might be start policy or replenishment policy. I've heard it called all sorts of different things. And so in your pull policy, what you decide to do. You like that one at the top there, number one, is are we going to unblock that first? Are we going to get rid of the traffic cones around that item? Are we focusing on the second item? So we tend to like to unblock items. We tend to focus on work item aging. So how old is the item since it started? And so typically any workflow will have a started point, and finished point. We used to call it start point and finish point, and people kind of got confused because they might actually have the start point as the column rather than the border between the columns, and people kind of got confused. Does it include or exclude that column? So the started point is on the border between, where it starts, and you can see finish point at the end. And all the items that are in between would be the work in progress. We call it work in progress instead of work in process. And the cycle time is how long does it take to get from your started point to your finish point plus 1 calendar day. Remember, it's in calendar time, right? So we keep an eye on that. And also we need to keep an eye on the work item age. So how old is all that work in the system? Well, relatively older. So it looks like, for example, if you go right to left, a lot of people think the right to left is a good strategy. Sometimes it isn't the best strategy, because maybe, for example, item number 4 there is actually older. Maybe that item is older, and maybe, although I would still tend to unblock a blocked item first. But if this one's actually more of a concern, this is more likely to kind of really disrupt our pattern in terms of cycle time plots and so on. We might want to focus on that one, but you decide that as the Kanban system members. You decide your own pull policy, what are the rules and so on. We're not prescriptive about that. And of course, throughput, how many items are you delivering per day, per week, per month, whatever your time period is. So there are the 4 measures. You've got the work in progress. You got your throughput. You got your cycle time. How long does it take to go through, and the work item age. And then the SLE is the forecast for how long it takes for a single item to go through the system. So you look at the history of your system and you say, well, okay, 85% of the dots in our scatter plot were below this line. So 15%, 15% of them were above that. So let's say, okay, 85% chance if you pick a single item, if you start a single item today, it's likely, if it's like the basket of work we had in the past, it's likely to take this long. We call that a service level expectation, of probability forecast, and a certain number of days or less. So just a reminder there of the 3 practices: defining, visualizing, and workflow, activating, managing work items in a workflow, unblocking items, working on aged items, trying to make sure we're not chasing new shiny balls over old shiny balls, and then reviewing and improving the workflow. We're not explicit about how frequently you do that. We don't even say you need to have a daily meeting. You might have one. We don't even talk about retrospectives. You might have one. That might be a good thing to do. But if we're saying, does it have to be in Kanban or not, we're saying no. So this is a visualization of what's on the guide. And so I think the visualization is kind of better than kind of reading all those words, basically. So you need to have policies about how work items flow through the system. And the other thing to bear in mind is you can have more than one started point and more than one finished point. So you might be measuring maybe 3 cycle times. Maybe the team cares about when, going back to the visualization there, maybe the team cares about, when it goes into the second in progress column and when it leaves the third in progress column. Because that's when they're actually doing the work, and maybe the first one is where they told the customer they're going to do it, but they actually haven't started yet. So, but if they have a customer centric mindset, I would hope their cycle time would include the time from the time they told the customer that they're going to start the work. Could be longer, might not even be to done. It's kind of good to try to go down, as far downstream as you can, and maybe as far upstream as you can, so you can really improve the flow of work through the system. So maybe when we get our work done, if it's just waiting there for some other team, if they are a team, then is there really much benefit in that? So do we want a longer cycle time about when did it actually get delivered to the customer and was used by the customer, and when do we get feedback? So you can have a number of started points, a number of finished points. Okay. So that's what that's about there. So you can use additional elements such as values, principles, or that's a kind of a hint there that if you want to use the Kanban method, off you go, not a problem. And working agreements based on the team's circumstances. Then in terms of actively managing work, you've got controlling work in progress. I think you need to be careful here about how you manage the work. A lot of teams think fantastic will, isn't Kanban about stop starting, start finishing? And it is, right? But you have to also be careful that you don't starve the system. It's kind of it's really sad when a team is overburdened with work. It's almost more sad for me, I'd say almost, when a team, they seem to be very good at finishing work, but they let the system starve. So now actually we can't get any throughput for a few days because we don't have any work for the intermediate steps, and we're really stuck there. So just try to be careful there. So we don't want work piling up. We don't want work aging. We don't, we want to make sure that we're unblocking blocked work, but we also want to make sure that the system doesn't starve. That'd be kind of controlling it a bit too much, maybe. So just be careful about that. A little bit more text in the guide about that. We're controlling work in progress. You can use different types of WIP limits. We're not really prescriptive about how you do that. We give you some kind of ideas. There's some kind of additional information there on the side effects of doing that. More there about the service level expectation, looking at your history. So based on your forecasts, how long should a single item take from start to finish? If you're planning for a single item, you can use the SLE. If you're planning for multiple items, in the very short term, you could use throughput. My personal preference is to use probabilistic forecasting, even for the short term, but you could use throughput because little is always used for describing the past, not for telling you what's going to happen in the future, right? So I like to use probabilistic forecasting for what's coming up next. And if there's for a single item that has started, my personal preference is to look at work item aging. So you can look at the SLE, how long do these items normally take, but if that item is in an early column on the board and it's actually gone very old in that column for where it should be, it's that might be a better indicator about how likely it is that when it is likely that item might actually get finished. A lot of Kanban system members kind of forget about the improving the workflow. They just design their board and these are the columns and these are the limits, and they let the board go stale, and it's not nice when that happens. So try to get into a habit to recurringly look at that. And here's just a reminder of some of the measures as well. You can use some additional ones as well. A lot of people like flow efficiency, for example. The guys in TapeFlow like flow efficiency. I think flow system as well. Not a problem. We just don't have them as the minimum 4 or minimum 5, if you like, if you had that one, because flow efficiency isn't as actionable. It's very useful, but how actionable is it? But in the addendum, you'll see there's an addendum for this document as well, and in there we have specific guidance on use of TapeFlow, for example. What kind of policies you might want to use, what additional measures you might consider. If you were to have many teams, how would they work together? How would we don't like scaling, but how would you get multiple teams working more effectively together? And of course, these charts, whatever charts you use, it's kind of meaningless unless you've got, whatever metrics you have, it's kind of meaningless unless you've got charts to kind of show you the trends, really. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? And we encourage, of course, the use of data-informed decision-making. So a combination of quant and qual. So the flow will tell you something. I often tell people never judge Kanban system members by their charts. There's always a story behind the charts, some context. So talking to people, trying to understand what's actually going on, it's really, really important as well. So that's a really quick run-through of the guide. Like a 20-minute run through of the guide. I hope that wasn't too long for you. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, there's also reference to the history and acknowledgements and so on, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to you and just see, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, so got a question for Daniel Dwaran. You're right, Daniel. We don't have flow efficiency in the guide. It's like trying to select your favorite children. It's almost impossible, isn't it? So it's like a lot of things we would love to have in there. There's on the site itself. If I just show you the site, the website where the guide is stored. So if I just go back here, you'll notice up the top right corner, there's optional definitions, which you'll download a PDF file describing some terms. We're not saying that we know what these words mean. We're just saying this is what we mean when we say these words. And there's also an optional addendum, and you'll see a lot of optional stuff in there. And some of the stuff is we say optional, not required. There's something you could do, but it's optional. And there's other items where we say recommended, basically optional, but recommended kind of thing. So there's some things in there that you can look at. Flow efficiency is directly mentioned, Daniel, in the addendum. So if you want to use that as an additional measure, that's totally cool with us. No issues there at all. We're just saying like the 4 minimum, absolute minimum, you have to have, your work in progress, your cycle time, your throughput, work item age. For me, the one I find most useful is work item age, but I understand with a theory of constraints context, from TameFlow, if you want to step up to TameFlow for a particular pocket of your organization, I can see how you might value flow efficiency, how it's central to TameFlow, and how it helps you to understand where your blockages are. So Daniel, we don't object to it. We're just saying they're not in the minimum on the guide, so to speak. I think the guys in Flow System would like to see us adding flow efficiency as well, but so far we haven't added it, Daniel. And then Daniel makes another comment about nice touch about the starving. There's a lovely little simulation by Klaus Leopold called Twig, and if you're not familiar with Twig, it's a really simple little game. So essentially, I think I have the URL here. I can drop the link on the window if you haven't, if you're not familiar with it. But nice little online simulation on Kanban, and a lot of people, what they do is, they're trying to figure out, where they put the, where the green people are going to play today, or where the blue people are going to play today, or where the red people are going to play today, and how do we help each other out and all that kind of thing. And it's about us as a team deciding where we want to do our work today and so on. And what I find when people go through this simulation, a trap that people fall into is they actually they go way below the WIP limits, which is nice. I mean, that's fine because the WIP limits are maximums unless there's a buffer, like you've got a constraint, like in TameFlow, for example. But in general, they're like maximums rather than minimums. And so they're finishing all the work, and that's all fantastic. And then they let the red column go blank, and because the red column goes blank for a day, unless they have a very good day, the following day blue is going to be blank as well, or maybe for 2 days even, or 3 days. So a lot of people fall for that. And what happens when you do that, when that happens, your throughput might have been very, very good, and then it goes to 0 for a while because, yeah, you're working on stuff, but there's a gap. We've allowed a gap to happen in our flow, and it causes issues. So yeah, it's a real fan of that. So thank you for that, Daniel. So any more questions or comments from anyone? Because it could be a very short show today if you don't have any more comments. WIP paging is so cool. Yeah, I love WIP paging. So just to explain what that is actually for some people who aren't familiar. So if I go back to that Twig simulation, for example, and I go to look at the analytics, this chart here is called a work item aging chart, but I need to explain something else first, because there's some percentage lines on the right hand side. You might be wondering where are they coming from, and they're basically overlaid from a different chart called a cycle time scatter plot. So this is a cycle time scatter plot here. Across the bottom, you've got calendar time. I just changed the layout there so I don't see a date control at the bottom. So you've got the calendar going across the bottom, and then you've got cycle time. How long did an item take going up? And so what I often tell people is you're after taking over from this not so fantastic team. And So initially they had a bit of a honeymoon period and delivered 2 items on the same day, and it took 10 days cycle time, and then another one for 10 days, and then it went up to 11 and 13, 13, and but then it kind of goes a bit pear-shaped. So like 18, 19, 20 days, and one of the things I like to say to people is one of the things I'm thankful about coronavirus. I mean, a lot of bad things happen. A lot of people in my own family are affected by this, but on the humorous side, I'd say, look, there's not quite like a coronavirus spike yet, but it's not going in the right direction. And so let's see if we can have our own little vaccine in our team to, kind of curb that, because we don't need to be geniuses to figure out that if the cycle time keeps getting longer, our throughput eventually will drop, right? So where do those lines, these percentage lines here, if even a child could do this, because basically what you could do is you can say, if you draw a ruler up the page, 70% of the dots, remember some of these show multiples, so each of these is an item that went through the board. There's 2 here, there's 2 here. So 70% of the dots are at that line or less. So in other words, 70% of the time we delivered in 13 days or less, whereas 85% of the time we delivered in 18 days or less. And if you want to go 95%, if it's like some legal thing or something, like 19%, you never say 100%, right? So those percentages are actually coming from this chart. It's looking at our history. So then when you look at the work item aging chart, you say, okay, that's interesting. Look at that. So those percentages come true, you see. So in the last column, it's green up to 70%, or you can up to 70%. Usually there's 2 shades of green, but not in this case. Between 70 and 85, it's like yellow. So this item is getting a bit dodgy because, you know what, this is 15 days. 85% of the time we deliver in 18 days or less, but like, okay, I hope we finish this today because it's kind of in the danger zone of getting late. And then when it goes up here above 95%, 85% above 95% goes to amber, orange, or red accordingly. So that seems fairly kind of clear in the final column, but like when you step back, it's kind of logical that for previous states and previous columns in your workflow, well, then the green is earlier because blue work happens before green work. So the green work based on the history, the blue work seems to finish in. I'm trying to read this here. It looks like between 10 and 11 days. So, but this guy again is a bit dodgy. M is like 13 days old. Like so, that's looking a bit dodgy. And this item here is on the borderline, so it's kind of okay. We just need to keep an eye on item P. This one's a bit dodgy. So if I was having a daily meeting, my personal preference would be, instead of having everyone doing a filter of Daniel, here's Daniel's work, and here's Andrew's work, and here's John's work, I prefer to look at this and say, okay, well, which ones are the ones we need to worry about today? Well, we need to worry about N, M, and O, and these 2 are getting a bit dodgy too. These ones are kind of okay right now. We probably should put our focus on the yellow ones, and in a lot of teams' cases, the red ones, items in red and orange. I tend not to worry so much when it's kind of like green and yellow, but in this case, just to illustrate, if I was to look at work item aging, I'd probably focus on those 3 items. So kind of nice balance between finishing work, but which items are aging more, and is the system starving? It's like a trade-off. It's like really, really interesting. So I love this chart, and I highly recommend it to people when they're trying to manage their flow. So thank you for that comment, Daniel. So Daniel's got another comment as well. So I like to use WIP aging as a lead indicator of risk. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it gets you to focus on the far left of the board. Yeah. So one of the downsides, even I used to say, you should work the board right to left, and I think in my image it still actually says that. That's one of the changes I might make, because that can be a good thing, all things being equal. No aging in the system, but if there is some aging in the system, actually I'd look at aging first. And in Daniel's case, when he's using chain flow, if there's one of those columns as a constraint, are we feeding that constraint? But that's that we described that in other shows on other days when we talked about chain flow. Here today, we're just talking about the basic Kanban guide. So thank you for that comment, Daniel. And that chart, as far as I know, is Daniel Vicanti created that chart, and Daniel, the main driver behind the guide, really. And very grateful to the work that he's been doing. He's got some fantastic talks, by the way. One of them being how an expedite request sunk the Titanic. And I like to say to people, don't let the truth get in the way of good story. It seems maybe it is true. It seems logical. It seems nice, but it definitely illustrates the point of flow. So full credit. Very well presented, brilliant video. So make sure you check it out. It's on Vimeo and it's on YouTube. How an expedite request sunk the Titanic. So Andrew wants to know more about Monte Carlo. Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for that. So what you could do on the system is, let's say the team here using Twig, and they're at the moment, if we look at their throughput, this is done on a weekly basis. This doesn't look good, right? So like throughput should be going up, actually. That's one graph we do want to go up, or stabilize at least, but it's kind of going down. So it kind of confirms that this team kind of sucks, right? But what you could do is you could say, well, when I'm doing my next week of work, how do I forecast due based on throughput? Which one do I pick though? Like, is it that low point, or maybe it's low because it's the middle of the week or something, and maybe it's not a fair point. But is it this? But should I use this? Should I use this? Should I use this? Which one do I use? And so, what we do in Monte Carlo is essentially this tool. It's available on Actionable Agile as well, which is available as a plugin to most tools like Kanban, Jira, Azure. Trello, I think, a few of the tools, the most common tools. And what you can do is you can say you can treat these as possibilities for your throughput. And so instead of just using throughput, which I think is a bit risky, right? What you could do is you could look at this tool here, Monte Carlo when. So you can pick Monte Carlo when, this one here. A lot of people don't understand these charts up here, but everybody understands the date control. And so what you could do is you could say, well, hang on a second, I've got we think we've got 50 more items to do, but what, could be very messy. Could go up to 75 actually. And so what this does, it runs 10,000 trials based on what was your throughput before. The backlog might be 50, it might be 51, it might be 74, it might be 75. We sucked this week, or we did brilliantly this week. It plays all those different scenarios. Not that many parameters, so that the forecast is higher quality. But you can keep running more trials. You can run up to 1 million, I believe. And so it's running it there. And so what it's doing is it's looking at the throughput that we had there. How are we doing? And what it does, it says, based on that, it says, okay, when I rolled the dice on this, well, 50% of those occurrences were before the 22nd of July, I think, something like that. But that's like saying heads or tails, Are we going to deliver? I don't think that's the really good basis for setting expectations with stakeholders. Probably a good way to get fired, right? And there's also a book I have here. 1 second, I hope I don't lose my headphones here. A book that Dan Vicanti recommends. I hope this isn't showing in mirror mode. I hope it's so. But the title is The Flaw of Averages by Sam L. Savage. So if you plan an average, you fail an average. Okay, it sounds a little bit glass half empty or glass half full, but you get the point, right? Not really the basis for planning. So what we tend to do in Monte Carlo is we say, well, what level of risk appetite do we have here? Can we tolerate a 30% chance of being wrong, 25%? A lot of people kind of settle on 85%. I don't know why. It's just, I guess it's between 100 and 70, and 70 is kind of a high level of confidence. So a lot of people would say 85%. So what this does here is the calendar control, which is beta, says, okay, if you want this to deliver, well, yeah, we think we could, I'm trying to look at, we think we get 21st of August. If we have 50 to 75 items, based on the data right now, based on the basket of work that's gone through the system, there's an 85 to 86% chance we will deliver by the 21st of August. In other words, there's a 14 to 15% chance we won't deliver by the 21st of August. And then what I say is, and I'll give you a better forecast next week. In other words, I don't know. But it's nice because you're using the history system. But if some genius says to you, know what, no, it has to be done by the 30th of June. Yeah, 20% chance of that happening. You like those odds? Thought not. So it doesn't matter what weekends we're going to work. That's not going to work. So what people in a telecoms company told me is that, John, this is like night and day. I said, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, it's like really clear what we need to do. We need to reduce the number of items in order to hit the day. Yeah, absolutely, because we don't have a magic lever to make teams go faster, right? Well, I wouldn't say magic. One of the techniques you can use is controlling WIP and managing work item aging, which will really help. But a lot of people struggle to do that. So if you're looking for something more short term, maybe you just need to limit the number of items that you're expecting to deliver, which means you're simplifying the scope basically. And I often find anyway that stakeholders won't admit that they don't want everything until you can prove you can't deliver. And then it's amazing when you say, 20% chance we deliver by the 30th of June. It's amazing what they'll accept. That, we could just do this, we could just do that. Why did you tell me that first in the first place, dude? It's just a human thing. I don't know. I don't understand it. But anyway, I find that very useful, Andre. And in some tools, like Kanban, for example, you can actually you can have work items rolling up to projects, rolling up to initiatives, rolling up to OKRs or some other kind of measurement you're having, whatever. You can have them all rolling up. And if you click on a project, it'll give you a forecast for that project or that product, whatever you're working on. Say 85% chance we deliver by this date. And actually, one of the tools goes optimistic, realistic, pessimistic, very pessimistic, and I would tend to go for pessimistic or very pessimistic because I like to under promise and over deliver. But that's just me. So that's Monte Carlo in a nutshell. Daniel Vicanti do a much better job of explaining. I just showed you how to use the tool. There are other options available as well. One of the real advantages of this is it uses the data in your system. And if you've just plugged into your whatever tool you're using, you can run this at any level. So you can forecast work items or projects or epics or whatever you use in our higher level. So depending on the level you've got, as long as you've got enough data, there needs to be enough data. In other words, enough of the items need to have got done. So you can start saying, okay, now I've got enough data to do some forecasting. And that typically takes 8 weeks for work items, can take up to 6 months for projects or epics. This is just my own rough experience. I don't want to be saying what it is for everybody else. So, Andrew, let me know if you found that useful. Thank you so much for that comment. And got another one from Lucas. Lucas, thank you very much for your comment. So, from Facebook. So, when someone is starting Kanban, can you recommend some additional literature that complements Kanban guides besides already mentioned materials? Well, I think they're already mentioned. So in the addendum, at the bottom of the addendum, you'll see a load of references there. So Don Reinerson's book would be, Don Reinerson's flow book would be kind of right up there. Some Klaus Leopold books would be right up there as well. Daniel Vicanti's books, for example, when will it be done? But I think they're all mentioned. But you're asking for additional. Henrik Nieberg as well has done a few books in Kanban, quite cool. So they'd be the kind of the top ones that I would look at. Look at. Let me know if there's something else you're looking for, something a bit more specific than that. So your comments are drying up now. So I'm quite happy to end this call early if you don't have any more questions. But I'm just going to give you a moment to give me some more, just to give you some more information while I'm waiting for you to do that. If you want to read the guide further, look at kanbanguides.org, kanbanguides.org. It's a very simple guide. It's like 8 pages, something like that. And really some definitions file. There's addendum, which is optional. So we had it in the middle of the page. We moved up to the corner because people would get confused by it. But the real benefit of people, for anyone doing the assessment, in my personal opinion, is that one of the benefits of reading the addendum and the definitions is it kind of confirms to you that from a Kanban guide's point of view, if it's not mentioned in Kanban guide, pretty much it's optional. That's kind of what we're saying. And so that's purely from an assessment point of view for example, ProKanban.org or something like that. When you look at that, it kind of helps you to realize that when things aren't there, because sometimes when something isn't there, I know I'm like this. If something isn't there, I assume it's still there, but actually it's not there. As in it's there, but we don't think it's needed, kind of thing. We don't think it's the absolute bare minimum. That's our opinion, of course. Other people beg to differ. We're continuing to collaborate with various Kanban flow communities to try to get more content into the addendum so we can support other flow systems, other Kanban systems out there, because our mantra is kind of like Kanban diversity over Kanban supremacy. We're not saying we know everything. We realize that there's lots of really good work out there, and people might decide to use some of those options, and that's completely fine. One of the real benefits of using Kanban guide is you can start with something really, really simple, and that's value in itself, isn't it? Because people kind of get confused and might just need the bare minimum. And once you get them up and running, if you decide certain pockets need something a little bit more advanced, that's no problem. They can go off and do that. But you kind of use this as your kind of core language, if you like. That's the other thing, by the way, in the latest version of the guide, while we have even though we say this is what we mean by words, and even though we use particular words, we're kind of saying you can call things what you want, but this is what we mean when we use our words, kind of thing. So we're trying to be as inclusive as we can with the rest of the Kanban flow community. Okay, a couple more. So thank you. Question from YouTube, Eric. In case it was not mentioned, quickly leave from very good. Yeah, that's a very good one. Yeah, that's Henrik Nieberg, Eric, isn't it? That's a really good one. Thanks for that. Little's law, is it mentioned in the guide? I think we're not calling out the formula per se, but you'll see references to it, particularly in the addendum. One of the things we'd like you to avoid is what Daniel calls Little's flaw, where you think you could just use Little's law as a formula to, magic will happen. You control work in progress and magic will happen. But actually, if you let work age a lot, the magic doesn't happen. It's just, he's just chasing you shiny new balls. So there's a video on Vimeo called Little's Flaw that I recommend. So we're not kind of overplaying on that, but we do refer to it, and it's definitely referenced from the addendum. There's a whole body of knowledge that's referenced. And just curious, actually, if I just, it's kind of funny, and I was involved myself, but no harm to it. Sometimes you need to do a little check to see if you're going crazy, but yeah, I don't see the word little coming up, Daniel. Any more questions or comments from anyone? Have I made you starve by talking about starvation earlier? That's kind of it, really. This Kanban guide, very, very straightforward. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I'm just going to give it another 20 seconds or so to see if there's any more comments. And if there aren't, I'll leave it there for today. So while I'm just waiting for you to do that, just a gentle reminder, kanbanguides.org. You've got, you can read the guide online. You can download it in English. In the coming months, you'll be able to read it in different languages as well. And we're taking an interesting approach to the translations. I hope you like that when you see it, because we want people to really trust the translation and not assume that you always have to go to the English version. So let's see what happens. That's like in the coming weeks. I hope we'll have one or two of the translations ready, and in the coming months we'll have a few more. So I think we've got 10 translations going through the system at the moment. There's a whole community around this. So Pro Kanban website, the Pro Kanban Slack. There's also a meetup group. Jose Casal and Jean-Paul Bailey and Matt Qureshi are looking after that meetup group, and they do that in all sorts of time zones. I've seen some American time zones, and I've seen some European ones. If you want to submit an idea as in something you think that sucks in the guide, and you think, well, we need John, Daniel, can you kind of do something different? Just submit an idea there, and the idea won't appear straight away. It'll appear in our list, and then when we put the ideas together, we kind of put them into an item for people to vote on. So people will have the opportunity to vote on, what they want to see coming up next in the guide. There's also a Slack channel for Kanban guides itself. Okay, 2 more comments. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you very much for joining. You were here last week as well, I believe. And there's a Sprinklers podcast. Thank you, Eric. I'll check that out. I'm looking forward to that. And curious who you're going to interview for that, but lovely. It's good to see that. Another one to watch out for as well would be the Drunk Agile podcast. I'm not joking, it's called Drunk Agile. Daniel Vicanti and Pratik, they have a bit of fun about, and they go through some myths and so on. And so check that out as well. It's on podcast, it's also on YouTube. I started getting familiar with it on YouTube, and I noticed at the weekend there was a podcast available as well, so check that out. All right, everyone, thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely week, and If there's some other topic that you'd like me to talk about, like ask John about whatever, just let me know what that is, and I'll see if I can look it up. Oh, Louis Philippe, very good. Fantastic. Thank you, Eric. All right, over and out, everyone. Thanks very much. Have a lovely day, lovely week. Bye-bye.